Hello, I'm David Dibble, and in this video I'll be demonstrating how I paint a landscape on location. First, let's talk about materials. Plein air painting requires a lot of gear, and while I'm packing up, I like to think through the process of painting so I don't miss the essentials. I'll ask myself questions like, do I have something to hold my canvas while I'm painting? You'll need an easel of some sort, and basic French easels are fine for beginners and vary in price and quality. More portable and professional setups called pochade boxes include a tripod and a compact palette, and you can find various models online. Next, I'll ask, do I have something to paint on? Whether a stretch canvas, a canvas panel, or wood of some sort, always make sure your painting surface is primed with gesso. Next, I'll ask, do I have somewhere to mix paint? I recommend a wooden palette rather than a glass one, which can break during transport. I'll pack up an apron as well to wear on location, and a special umbrella which helps me see value better on the canvas. Then I'll ask, do I have something to paint with? Palette knife is vital, and for brushes, I usually use a mixture of hog bristle and synthetic brights and filberts because they hold more paint and they're firm. I'll pack some odorless turpentine and make sure that I have enough before I go. Only use metal or glass containers to hold solvent because it will leak through anything plastic. If you're worried about your container spilling, carry it instead of packing it. Then I'll make sure I have paint. There are lots of quality paint brands. Just keep in mind that generally, the cheaper the paint, the less pure it will be and the less tinting strength it will have. Finally, make sure you've got lots of paper towels and a garbage bag for the dirty ones. Don't forget to bring water to drink and a hat and some sunscreen. You're going to be outside for several hours. So, with all that in mind, let's go paint. Once I've found a location and subject matter that I like, I'll start trying to find a composition of those elements. I look around and ask myself questions to guide the composition. Things like, what's interesting here, and what drew me to this location? What do I have to say about this location that's different or unique? Sometimes I'll use my camera and possibly a viewfinder and start to decide how to frame the scene in a way that best tells the story and that's most interesting to me. This is where I sometimes decide to rearrange certain elements to better tell the story that I want, and from the beginning I'm thinking about perspective and whether a high or low horizon will be most engaging. Next, I'll take out my sketchbook and start doing simplified value compositions. This helps me to figure out what the focal point is and how I can simplify down shapes, size relationships, and the value structure of lights and darks to create a specific area of interest. This step is generally where the painting either succeeds or fails. Now that I have my composition and value structure set, I'm ready to start into the painting. Let's talk about color for a minute. There's a lot to talk about here, but the general idea is that I have a warm and a cool version of each of the three primary colors, and a warm and a cool dark color. I generally don't use black to mix my darks, but mix them from other colors. And there's no single correct color palette here. I'll change it up occasionally and use other colors, but as long as you're thinking in terms of warm and cool temperature, you're off to a good start. Once I've got a good composition, I'm ready to do a rough lay-in. This can also be called the drawing portion of the painting, and it's basically a chance for me to transfer my sketch to the canvas and to start to establish my basic value structure. I'm not just outlining things here. I'm looking for the shadow side of shapes and establishing form, proportion, shape, and perspective. Generally, using a dark, warm color for the lay-in helps the painting feel more alive and grounded as cooler colors are placed over the top later on. I'm ready to start laying in color now, and I'm going to show you an awkwardly long shot of myself to underscore the fact that mixing color starts by seeing color. And to see color, you really have to study it, not just glance at whatever you're looking at. Don't just look at the grass and mix green because you've known your whole life that grass is green. Really look at what color the grass is compared to what it's next to. I often put my fingers together into a small little wedge to isolate the color I'm looking at and start to break it down. Simplify a color by its basic properties of hue, value, and saturation. Mix what you think you see, and then hold up your palette knife to the object and compare it, while asking yourself, does this need more red, more blue, more yellow? Should it be warmer or cooler than what I'm looking at? And then adjust accordingly. I've pre-mixed a few foundational colors that I think I'll need, and now I'm going to block in some of the basic shapes. You'll notice that right off the bat I realized that my pre-mixed shadow color wasn't quite warm enough, so I quickly need to warm it up. With all my pre-mixed colors, they serve only as a starting point, and I'll adjust them as I go. Generally, I work from dark to light, and I start with thinner paint and get thicker as I go. Most students are terrified of wasting paint and they won't put enough on the canvas initially, so make sure that you're not thinning things down too much in the beginning. Some of this is a stylistic choice, but just thinning down paint because you're afraid to commit leads to muddy and overworked paintings. I usually reserve my darkest accents for later on, but I'll get some of the big shadow shapes in quickly and also hit a note or two of the brightest accent color so that I know what my full value range is. If you don't do this, it's often easy to paint the entire time and then realize at the very end that the whole painting was too dark and it's too late to fix it. I'll add more details in later, but I'll get a few key shapes established relatively quickly so that I can compare them to each other and then make adjustments as needed. Don't feel compelled to cover every inch of the canvas at once, but get enough in that you have something to work with and can start to establish your focal point. Decide what's most important and what can either be suggested or left until later. Though you are working from general to specific, always be cautious about telling yourself that you can fix something later. As in life, we make choices about painting based on previous choices. Too many problems, once introduced and unresolved, will skew your perception of value, color, or composition and become ingrained in the piece and harder to identify. Don't be afraid to take risks or to put paint down, but if you lay down a color and it's not the right color or value, deal with it immediately and then move on. I've now established the general idea of things, and it's time to refine things a bit. I'll tighten some things up and soften others, and with everything I do from this point on, I'm trying to strengthen the focal point. If you're ever struggling to know what to put in or what to leave out, just ask yourself, what am I trying to say here? Does this support or detract from my main idea? And if you're not sure what the main idea is, step away from the painting for a minute and then come back to it. Whatever your eye jumps to first is your focal point. And if that's not what you want your focal point to be, then start making adjustments. At this point in the painting, I'm generally working slower and more deliberately. I'm trying to add detail, but the right details, and that involves looking and analyzing more than painting. Remember, you're the artist, and you have something unique and purposeful to say about this scene. What was it that attracted you to it in the first place? Focus on that and force the other things to support it. Just because you see something doesn't mean you have to paint it. If it's distracting, then leave it out. As is the case with writing, the best painting is often about good editing, and I'll almost always simplify things down from what I'm seeing and make it more graphic and straightforward. Sometimes I'll even go in with a big brush at the end and soften up areas where I put in too much contrast or hard edges so that I can emphasize the focal point and simplify the form. Thank you for sharing this time with me, and I wish you the best as you go out and see the world around you in new and exciting ways. Let's go paint.